Hello, good morning. This is BBC News with the latest headlines. EU leaders are set to discuss tougher controls on coronavirus vaccine exports as they try to boost supplies and improve distribution amongst member states, which could affect supplies to the UK. Pub landlords in England may be able to refuse entry to customers who can't prove they've had a coronavirus vaccine. A government review is looking at the issue. So what do you think about those possible plans for vaccine passports at pubs? Will they help pubs to stay open or be difficult to police? Do contact me on Twitter at Annita_McVeigh and use the hashtag BBC Your Questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Results from 2 UK studies suggest middle-aged women experience the most severe, long-lasting symptoms after being treated in hospital for coronavirus, with more than 2/3 continuing to have symptoms more than 5 months later. North Korea fires 2 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. The Japanese Prime Minister calls it a threat to peace and security. Retail giant H&M faces a backlash and a potential boycott in China because it won't source its cotton from Xinjiang province over concerns about the alleged use of forced labour from Uyghur Muslims.
Goats and alpacas in the centre of London. For 50 years, city farms have been bringing wildlife into urban areas, and during the pandemic, they've been doing even more than that. We'll be finding out what a little later.
Hello, a very good morning to you and welcome to BBC News. EU leaders are holding a summit today at which they'll discuss tougher controls on vaccine exports as they try to boost their COVID vaccine supplies and improve the rollout of jabs. The European Commission has blamed pharmaceutical companies, primarily AstraZeneca, for not delivering promised doses to the EU. It will ask EU leaders to support plans for new controls on vaccine exports, which could affect supplies to the UK. The virtual summit comes as a third wave of coronavirus infections sweeps across much of mainland Europe. If approved by EU leaders, tougher export controls are most likely to affect countries that have higher vaccination rates than the EU, such as the UK and United States. Under the plans, member states and the Commission would consider the state of the pandemic in a destination country, its vaccination rate and vaccine supplies before deciding whether to allow exports. Vaccine manufacturers would also be assessed to see if they are fulfilling their contracts with the EU. Earlier, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned against imposing what he called blockades, and in a joint statement on Wednesday, the UK and the EU said they wanted to create a win-win situation and expand vaccine supply for all. The statement went on, "We are all facing the same pandemic, and the third wave makes cooperation between the EU and UK even more important." It comes as the National Medical Director for the NHS, Stephen Powis, urges the over 50s and those at greater risk to book their COVID-19 vaccines quickly. The NHS is expecting a slowdown in UK vaccine supply during April. We'll be talking about this much more, but this first report is from John Donnison.
The vaccine row between the UK and the EU has been rumbling on for months. But it's intensified, with many countries on the continent now facing a third wave amid concerns over vaccine supply and a slow rollout of the jab. In a joint statement last night, the EU and the UK said they were working on ways to better cooperate over vaccines. So could an end to the acrimony be in sight?
This is very positive news. What we want to see is we want to see vaccines flowing freely around the world. We want to work to build capacity so that we can make sure that everybody gets vaccinated, including the UK, the EU, and of course many developing countries, because we're only going to tackle coronavirus by making sure everybody gets vaccinated. So this is a very positive step forward.
EU leaders will meet via video conference today to discuss ways of boosting vaccine supplies and possible new restrictions on vaccine exports, including doses of the AstraZeneca jab, which could impact the UK.
The point is AstraZeneca is fulfilling its contracts in the UK and is not fulfilling its contracts in the European Union. And they are exporting vaccination material from the EU to the UK and not fulfilling the duties that they have within the European Union. And I think it's just natural that the European Union has to react to this.
But some health officials have accused European leaders of sending out confusing messages over AstraZeneca by questioning the vaccine's efficiency and safety, which has led to poor uptake of the jab on the continent. With many EU voters angry at their governments over ongoing lockdowns and frustrated with vaccine rollouts that lag far behind the UK, there is a political blame game underway.
You cannot wrap a flag around a vaccine in this modern world. It just doesn't work that way. These are integrated supply chains, and any attempt to impose any barriers whatsoever will disadvantage everybody involved.
In other words, so-called vaccine nationalism might be understandable, but not helpful with a pandemic that's global. John Donnison, BBC News.
And I'm joined now by Jutta Paulus, a German MEP from the Greens and European Free Alliance Group, who sits on the European Parliament's Public Health Committee. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC News this morning. It really makes sense, doesn't it, for the UK and the EU to cooperate on this, doesn't it, given that vaccines are manufactured and both components are coming currently from the UK to the EU, rather than the row accelerate?
Yes, good morning. I'm very much on the same page here, because what we are facing is a lack in production, and a lack in production cannot be tackled by fusing a trade war, because we have components of vaccines being produced in the UK, exported to the EU, being used by BioNTech Pfizer to produce doses that go back into the UK. And I think it should be made perfectly clear that the EU does not have a problem with the UK. The EU has a problem with AstraZeneca, because AstraZeneca is not fulfilling their promises, their contractual obligations. And
do you have any criticism for the way the contracts were drawn up between the EU and AstraZeneca on the EU side, and also the fact that, you know, there's a good deal of vaccine hesitancy in some countries, and leaders have contributed to that?
I think the whole AstraZeneca vaccine story is a communication disaster. It started with data not being supplied the way we would like to have it. Then it went on with some groups claiming that AstraZeneca's efficacy was not sufficient. Then we had this very weird start on how to deal with the side effects of blood clots. I think in a communicative way, that was not really the way it should be done. But I'm talking about the contractual obligations here. AstraZeneca has promised to the EU that they would pursue their best efforts to deliver 90 million doses in the first quarter. Now we are close to 17 million, which is considerably less. And there, I think it's very important that we have transparency.
That phrase, best efforts, sorry to interrupt, that phrase, best efforts is allows for a good deal of subjectivity, doesn't it? But from the figures that you're quoting, you're saying that what the company is doing is not its best effort?
Yes, I truly believe it's not its best effort, because what we are seeing with the doses that are delivered to UK and to other countries also, it's not only EU and UK. They actually seem to have sold their doses twice. And this is not best efforts. Very sorry about that. In my opinion, the EU should take AstraZeneca to court, because it cannot be considered best effort if you say, well, I just think that magically the doses which I can produce will double somehow.
Well, look, AstraZeneca says it is keeping to the terms of its contract with the EU. It says it is making its best efforts to supply the doses required. Now, you say that the EU's argument is with AstraZeneca, not with the UK. So when it comes to the issues of reciprocity and proportionality that we've heard the EU talk about in relation to where vaccines go, do they go to the UK from now on if the UK is steaming ahead with the vaccine rollout and other countries in the EU are not? Where does that leave the relationship, the political relationship between the UK and the EU?
As said, I don't think that the UK is behaving badly towards the EU. It's the company that's behaving badly, right? UK is not blocking components that are needed for vaccine production. And I think what we should take into account is the safety of all citizens. UK has been going ahead with giving people their first jab very quickly, saying, okay, we'll leave the second jab for later because we want to protect people as quickly as possible, which is perfectly fine. And I think it's also our responsibility to think of that, because if we would, I don't think that it will happen. If we would apply an export ban, then maybe people in the UK would not be getting their second jab in time, which is not really good for the vaccination efficacy. But I think what we should all do is step back and look at the whole picture. This is a pandemic. We have a global need of protection. And therefore, I would like to see all countries, especially the industrialized countries, coming together saying, okay, what can be done? Should we not call for the TRIPS waiver so that vaccine production can be ramped up all over the globe, so that we will try to broaden these bottlenecks, so to speak. Look at Brazil, where there's virtually no vaccine left and the health system is just falling to pieces as we speak.
OK, really interesting to talk to you, Jutta Paulus, an MEP, a German MEP there, part of the European Parliament's Public Health Committee. I'll be talking to a French MEP next hour on this subject as well. Meanwhile, here, MPs will vote today on the government's plan to renew emergency coronavirus powers for 6 months. It says only necessary and proportionate measures will remain to tackle the pandemic. The vote is expected to pass, but some Conservative MPs have criticised the thought of extending these emergency powers. One of those is Mark Harper, chair of the COVID Recovery Group of MPs, who joins me now. Mr. Harper, very good to have you with us. Thanks for your time today. So you say keeping most of these provisions of the Coronavirus Act until October isn't consistent with the Prime Minister's pledge when he said the roadmap out of lockdown would, to quote him, guide us cautiously but irreversibly towards reclaiming our freedoms by the 21st of June. Why are these things not compatible, in your opinion?
Well, you very accurately set out there the Prime Minister said that he wants all domestic legal restrictions gone by the 21st of June. And just on that, by the way, I do think, given the fantastic success of the vaccination rollout in the UK and the effect it's having on reducing hospitalisations and deaths, means that we could actually go further, faster along that roadmap more safely, which would save jobs and save businesses. But notwithstanding that, I haven't heard a good argument yet about why we should extend the very significant and draconian powers in the Coronavirus Act a full 6 months to October, which I don't think is consistent with the Prime Minister wanting to remove those restrictions by June. There's some very significant powers there. Powers for the police to detain people indefinitely, which haven't been used well. Powers for the police still to have control over directing events and gatherings all the way until October. I don't think that's consistent. That's why I won't be supporting them today.
You have decided absolutely that you will be voting against this. Is there anything that Boris Johnson could say to deal with your concerns?
Well, if he were to say that the extension is only going to be until June, or we were to take out of that act, and an amendment has been tabled today, some of the most significant powers, then I would look again at it. But the government hasn't made any indication that it's proposing to do so. And I think, therefore, there's no good reason why those measures should be extended. The government's own notes on this bill say that those measures are extraordinary measures that you wouldn't expect to normally see in place.
But
they should only be in place for the minimum necessary time.
But is there a case, as we consider the third wave across the EU, the threat of variants of this disease, is there a case for the government to have powers to order, if there is a threat which left unchecked, could have a greater impact on people's freedoms? And I'm thinking of, say, for example, what they've done in Australia, where they've had a number of very short snap lockdowns for a matter of days to try to deal with hotspots of cases. Do you see something like that potentially being effective here in the UK, looking ahead to the autumn?
Well, two things. First of all, the government still has the Public Health Act, which is actually the act under which the lockdown has been implemented. That's going to remain in place. But secondly, the way you deal with the threat from coronavirus, the way you save lives and protect the NHS, is no longer people staying at home. It's about rolling out the vaccination. We've now in this country almost vaccinated everyone in the top 9 groups, the groups that account for 99% of deaths and over 80% of hospitalizations. Once you've protected those people from COVID through vaccination, you may have an increase in cases, but that isn't going to translate into an increase in people going into hospital and people dying. And we can see in Israel what happens when you open up the economy but you vaccinated everybody, is that the rate of infection continues to fall, and you don't have that problem because the virus is hitting that wall of vaccinated people.
And
that's
the
what we're going to see here in the UK.
The vaccination programme is going brilliantly, and we do trust that it does protect us all from those variants that I was mentioning. But isn't this fundamentally about trust in your own Prime Minister? If he says, look, we're only going to use this through to October in a very proportionate way, can't you just trust him on that?
Well, first of all, he said that he wants all legal restrictions to be gone by June, and that's something that he's made a very clear commitment on. And I haven't heard a very good answer about why we need to extend the very draconian powers in the Coronavirus Act all the way through until October. It would have been open to the government to extend them just until June, or it would have been open to the government to drop those most draconian powers that I've just talked about. And the government hasn't done either of those things. So I think the government needs to think again. And if it doesn't think again by the time we vote today, then I will regrettably be voting against those powers being extended until October when we're asked to vote on it at 5 o'clock today.
While we have you with us, I do want to ask you as well about this idea of having passports, vaccine passports, to allow entry to pubs. What do you make of that idea?
Well, I rather agree with the Prime Minister's comments that he made just a month ago in February, when he said that he didn't think there was a case for papers for pubs. And I think that there are a lot of practical, ethical and moral and issues with this. And I hope that when the government thinks this through, it's only just started a consultation on this. I hope that when it thinks it all through, it will actually reflect on it and think that it's not actually a very good idea at all.
Is it a way initially to build confidence, though, to give people confidence about going back to pubs?
The problem with talking about it being something initially is, of course, it will exclude everybody that hasn't been vaccinated. So the irony is, a huge number of people that go to pubs are younger people. We've asked younger people who don't really suffer from COVID greatly to have huge economic impact and impact on their social lives over the last year to protect older people. If you were to open up the hospitality sector with these vaccination passports, you'd be excluding young people from them. And I think that would be unconscionable. We've asked young people to do a lot over the last year. And I think the least we can do is to get the economy open so that their futures are not damaged any further.
OK, Mark Harper MP, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And a lot of you have been getting in touch about this idea of possible vaccine passports to allow you to go to pubs and what you think of that. Rosie Weir says, as long as you can get a vaccine exemption card, then I don't see an issue with pubs being able to refuse entry to non-vaccinated people. In contrast, Rainbow says, utterly unacceptable. Hospitality should be fully supported, not restricted, divides the country and is discriminatory. Georgia Williams wonders, what about my pregnant friends who aren't allowed or are being advised to wait until after birth for their vaccine? Would that mean we couldn't go for a pub lunch together? Good question. And obviously this, does throw up so many questions. Gail Hume says, a vaccine passport for pubs. Ridiculous that we are discussing access to consuming alcohol. No mention of passports for access to gyms or health facilities. No wonder the UK's health stats are so bad if this is where our priorities are. Sarah Fisher, considering there's a large percentage of bar and waiting staff that won't be vaccinated due to age when they open, a passport is a must, or we're putting staff and vulnerable family members at risk just for going to work in a pub. Tony Katz says, needing vaccine ID proof to go into a pub, restaurant or other building is totally against a free and democratic society. It will discriminate against many. It will cause a polarisation of people. If this happens, we will not have a relaxed and happy people. Thank you so much for sending in those. I will try to read out more of your comments a little later on, so do keep them coming in. Annita _McVeigh is where you can get in touch with me on Twitter. Use the hashtag BBC Your Questions, but really interested to hear your thoughts on that particular story. Well, let's talk now to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming, who's in Westminster. So, Adam, sum up for us where we are politically, both domestically with regards to the extension of these emergency coronavirus powers, and then internationally with regards to the vaccine supply row.
Well, what's happening in Parliament today is that there'll be a vote on the government's continuing powers under the Coronavirus Act. That's the overarching legislation that lets the government do lots of things to manage the pandemic. That will be continued for a few more months. Then there'll be a separate vote on the legislation which underpins the Prime Minister's roadmap, which is the plan for unlocking the lockdown in England over the next few months. As we've just been hearing, there'll probably be a small Conservative rebellion over that, but not enough to derail the legislation, and it will go through. Although it will be interesting to hear the objections of Conservative MPs like Mark Harper, because we know even though they can't stop things in Parliament, they do feature and they do influence the Prime Minister in his thinking when he's making decisions in the future. Then we've also had a massive hint from the Prime Minister that he's now in favour of some kind of certification being used for people to access services and premises like pubs. That's currently the subject of a review by the Cabinet Office. They're looking at how could you find a secure way of people proving their status, possibly on their mobile phone. And it wouldn't just be whether they'd been vaccinated, it would also include whether they'd have a negative coronavirus test. And that's how you get around the discrimination elements of that. They're also looking at just what situations and circumstances you would use that in. It's just that pubs is the example that was presented to the Prime Minister, and pubs is what he suggested. And in terms of the international picture, it looks like this row between the UK and the EU about the export of vaccines from the EU to the UK and other countries has been defused. The EU is proposing, yes, a tougher mechanism for examining whether exports should go ahead, which will include looking at vaccination rates in the importing country and whether the importing country is sending vaccines and components back to the EU in return. But there's no guarantee that that will ever be applied to the UK, because it will be a judgment for EU officials on a case-by-case basis. And on top of that, last night we got a joint UK-EU statement, very reminiscent of the Brexit days, saying that the two sides are going to work together to boost capacity for everyone in the short, medium and long term. And part of me thinks, actually, could that be an opportunity to reset the overall relationship between London and Brussels, which has actually been a little bit rocky for the first few months of this year. And also, Anita, in closing, I've just seen the news that our colleague Simon McCoy is leaving.
He is. You know, what a loss he is going to be to the newsroom. That personality. I wish we could. Maybe we should get him on set to talk about him leaving. I don't know if we can do that today. He's busy getting ready for the 1 o'clock news, I think. But yeah, we're going to miss him, aren't we? And there'll be more of that later, I'm sure. Adam, thank you very much for that. Adam Fleming. And also our wonderful TV news director today, who's talking to me in my ear right now, Paul Risley, his name is. He is also leaving today. So I'm very glad he's directing me today, but also very sad that he's leaving too. Now, NHS staff in Scotland are to be offered a pay rise of at least 4%. The Scottish Government confirmed that nurses, paramedics and domestic staff are among those who could receive the boost to their salaries. Earlier this month, Boris Johnson defended plans to give some NHS staff in England a 1% increase. North Korea has fired 2 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan, according to Japanese and US officials. The missiles are said to have flown around 260 miles before landing in the sea. But Japan says no debris entered its territorial waters. It was North Korea's first ballistic missile test, which is outlawed by the UN since Joe Biden became US president. Professor Robert Kelly is a North Korea expert at Busan National University in South Korea, and he gave us this assessment of the threat posed by the missiles.
The North Koreans have had a pretty significant missile capacity now for at least a decade, and the ability to strike the United States, right, to send them very, very far for at least 4 years. So I'm not really sure that this actually adds anything dramatic that we haven't seen. I don't think it indicates, for example, the North Koreans are more willing to use them, for example. My own read of this is that it's probably sort of a test or sort of an effort to kind of provoke the Biden administration in its early days to tell them, you know, we're here, you can't push us around, pay attention to us, that sort of thing. I think the Biden people actually would be quite wise not to say a whole lot. I mean, this is how they responded to the shorter range tests just a few days ago. And the reason I suggest that is not because North Korea is not a threat. It obviously is. The Japanese are right in their response. It's just that the Biden people and the South Koreans and the Japanese too, I mean, we just don't have a lot of good options, right? And we can't strike the sites. Obviously, we're not going to risk a conflict with North Korea. They've got nuclear weapons. North Korea is already under sanctions. We can't, I mean, I suppose we could just slap more on them, but that's, we've already gone down that route pretty far. So the Biden administration's options are pretty limited. And I think this is why the Biden people have been fairly quiet about it, right? I think they don't want this to be sort of ginned up or sort of read into a test of its resolve or its willingness to sort of be tough, because the options are just so poor.
Robert Kelly. Now the time is 9:25. You probably don't expect to see sheep, goats or indeed alpacas in the middle of large British cities, but they're not that hard to find if you know where to look. Tim Muffet is in South London to tell us more, although clearly that's not Tim Muffet we're looking at right now. They're rather stealing the show, aren't they, Tim? Where are you? Somewhere off... Oh, there you are. Just a little off camera.
I am. Yes. Their heads of hair are far more impressive than mine. This is Jerry. That's Ben. These are alpacas, normally found in Peru. Right now we're in Vauxhall, just south of the River Thames. We've got a few sheep here as well. We've got Fred and Barney, some goats from Guernsey. The reason we're here is today is City Farm Day. Now, city farms have been around for 50 years. There are around 50 of them across the UK. Vauxhall City Farm has done an incredibly important job over the last, 50 years of integrating nature into the city and introducing people to wildlife and allowing them to interact with it. And during the pandemic especially, many city farms have played a really, really important role, going beyond that role and doing other things like providing food boxes, growing vegetables and many other things besides. Monica Tyler, you're the Chief Executive here at Vauxhall City Farm. You've got a fine selection of animals here. Tell us, what have you been doing this past year especially to try and help things along?
So the importance of city farms is that we bring communities together. So through this pandemic, what it's really shown us is the importance of having these outdoor spaces to bring various communities together. So we have 150 languages around here, and we have a very diverse group of people, and they all meet up at the farm. We've been doing veg boxes, we've been planting various plants for during lockdown. We've been doing lots of different activities that enable communities through the lockdown to come together.
So today is City Farm Day, and it's not just celebrating your work, but that of the 50 or so other city farms across the UK. What do you want it to achieve?
We want to highlight the importance of city farms, the role that we have to play in the community in bringing farms in bringing people together. Yes, it's hashtag City Farm Day today, and we're really excited because it means that people can really see how they can get involved in their local community.
Now, I mean, alpacas are typically found in Peru, so keeping them in South London or just south of the River Thames, I mean, how do they adapt to that kind of, well, this climate we're in?
They really enjoy it. They're very sociable animals, so they really enjoy having that social contact with people. They've been here with us for a few years, and they're well loved on the farm, and they love meeting people at all times.
They do. Jerry especially. It's been a media star this morning, isn't it? And
it
so going forward then, what do you want to happen now? How can you build on the work you already do?
What we want to happen is we want to see more and more people come to the farms, use the services that we have, whether it's animal husbandry, whether it's learning horticultural activities, particularly around here where people have flats and have small balconies. We're helping them over the next 6 months to transform their balconies and grow vegetables.
Sure. And you'll be opening up soon again?
We're opening up on the 13th of April. Really excited and looking forward to it.
Excellent stuff. And finally then, do you think that I mean, it's a tricky time for so many organisations, yours especially. How hard has it been to kind of keep going during the past year?
It's been tough because we lost 81% of our income when the pandemic hit. But what's been amazing is the community support. The community came together to replace that income to keep us going. It's been an amazing transformation for us during this time, and we're really looking forward to being able to reopen our doors to everybody.
Sure. Well, I'm sure many people will be very, very keen to get back and interact so closely with the animals here as well. It's not just alpacas, goats and sheep, but also we've rats and guinea pigs and all sorts of other things as well.
We've got horses. We do riding for the disabled. That will be starting up in the next few months again. It's really exciting that we've got new piglets coming, we've got donkeys, we've got a farm dog, a new farm dog called Delilah. So yeah, it's a really exciting time for us.
Great stuff. Well, thanks so much, Dean. Keep up the very good work which you do here. I know many people appreciate it. And as I say, it's not just the work here at Vauxhall City Farm as well, but the 50 or so other city farms across the UK which are being celebrated today. So I'll leave you with some lovely shots of Jerry the alpaca stealing the show, as he has been doing all morning this morning, and many other fine animals here at Vauxhall City Farm.
Jerry is amazing. I think I would pass on the rodent residents, but the farm dog and the alpacas, definitely a big thumbs up from me. Thanks ever so much, Tim. And hopefully people getting back to see them close up very, very soon. It's time for a look at the weather now, and Carol has the latest.
Hello again. Today is essentially a day of sunshine and showers. Now, the most prolific showers will be across the north and also the west, but in between them there'll be bright skies or indeed some sunshine. As we come further south, a lot of dry weather, but East Anglia, southern coastal counties, the Channel Islands, parts of Wales could still see the odd shower at times. Temperatures 7 in the north to 14 in Hull and also London. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, we start off with clear skies, still some showers in the west and the south. In the second half of the night, though, a weather front comes in, introducing heavier and also more persistent rain. And behind that weather front, we see a return to cooler conditions. In fact, some of the showers on the hills of Northern Ireland by tomorrow morning could well be wintry. So here's our weather front bringing the rain, moving from the west to the east, eradicating the brighter start with showers in the southeast. Behind it, a return to sunshine and showers, but above about 200 metres or so, the showers will be wintry. It's also going to be windy, so it will feel cold.
Hello, good morning. This is BBC News with me, Annita McVeigh. A summary of our main stories for you. And EU leaders are set to discuss tougher controls on coronavirus vaccine exports as they try to boost supplies and improve distribution amongst member states, which could affect supply to the UK. Pub landlords in England may be able to refuse entry to customers who can't prove they've had a coronavirus vaccine. A government review is looking at the issue. Results from 2 UK studies suggest middle-aged women experience the most severe, long-lasting symptoms after being treated in hospital for coronavirus, with more than 2/3 continuing to have symptoms more than 5 months later. I'll be talking to one of the report authors in a few minutes. North Korea fires 2 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. The Japanese Prime Minister calls it a threat to peace and security. Retail giant H&M faces a backlash and a potential boycott in China because it won't source its cotton from Xinjiang province over concerns about the alleged use of forced labour from Uyghur Muslims. And it's time for sport now. Let's get a full roundup from the BBC Sports Centre. Mike Bushell is there. And Mike, World Cup news, I believe.
Yes, indeed. It's hard to believe, isn't it? We haven't even had the Euros this summer. We're talking about next year's World Cup, qualifying for which has started, trying to get to Qatar. And it gets going tonight as well for Northern Ireland in Italy, Scotland hosting Austria, while England hosts the lowest-ranked European nation, San Marino. In contrast to England's easiest of starts, Wales had the most difficult of opening fixtures last night, away to the best team in the world, according to the rankings, Belgium.
Second half especially, we were good. We didn't create much, but in general play, and we defended well. We didn't really give them that many chances. I think they had a handful of chances, and he scored 3 of them, unfortunately. But yeah, I think there's positives to be taken, of course.
Next, a bit of breaking football news. The crew chairman, John Bowler, has released a statement announcing he's standing down. This is following the Sheldon report into child sexual abuse in football. In a statement, Bowler said, "I am satisfied with the findings of the review that found that the club did not have any knowledge of Barry Bennell's heinous crimes. I'll always be deeply appalled and sorry that those young players and their families suffered at the hands of this evil predator." That statement coming in from John Bowler in the last few minutes. Now to tennis, has been a great win overnight for Britain's Katie Boulter at the Miami Open. She's through to the second round after beating Czech player Kristina Pliskova. Heather Watson, though, she's out. While in the men's draw, British number 2, Cameron Norrie, managed a stunning comeback to beat Japan's Yoshihito Nishioka. Norrie was actually 5 games to 1 down in the deciding third set, but then won 6 games in a row to set up a meeting against 9th-seeded Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov. Now, the official countdown to the postponed 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games is underway after the Olympic torch was lit during a scaled-down event this morning. After a brief opening ceremony, members of the Japan women's football team began the torch's 120-day journey through 859 locations. It ends with the opening ceremony on the 23rd of July. There'll be no international fans at the Games, we know now, because of the pandemic. And former British athlete Ewan Thomas admits that's a real shame for all those involved.
In Atlanta, when we were doing the lap of honour for the 4x4, I'd missed my mum and dad every round after the 400. We'd organised to meet and say hi. I couldn't find them. I happened to spot them out of 100,000 people in the crowd. And to this day, that's one of my proudest moments as a 22-year-old sharing something special with my family. And I really feel for those athletes this time round who probably won't get that opportunity or might not.
And staying with the Olympics, tomorrow morning, British athletes will try and book their place at the Games when the trials for the marathon event take place at Kew Gardens in West London. And for one runner, making it to Tokyo would complete an incredible transformation because Tom Evans only took up the sport in 2017 as part of a drunken bet with his mates. Joe Linsky reports.
The marathon's the Olympics' longest race, but no route to the start line's ever the same. Tom Evans is 29. 4 years ago, he'd done one park run. But one night, his friends showed him a race through the Sahara. It's called the Marathon des Sables, and it's 150 miles long.
So I had some friends who did it in 2016. I then went on to do it in 2017 after betting them, after 1 or 2 beers perhaps, saying, yeah, I reckon I could do better than you guys. Yes, I was fit. I played lots of rugby. I went to the gym, but I didn't know. I was so naive.
Tom didn't just finish the race, he came third, Britain's best ever result. Now he runs trails round the world full-time. He left his career in the army to become an ultra runner, and he approaches endurance from a different perspective.
A professional athlete is training to perform their best when they're feeling their best, whereas a soldier is training to perform their best when they're feeling their worst. People describe 100-mile races as life in a day. And it really is, because you experience all of these emotions.
And after all those experiences, now you're going for a place in Team GB at the Olympics. How does that feel?
Pretty surreal. For me, the Olympics has always been something that you look up to, but you never think it's going to be you. Will that help me dig a little bit deeper when the race gets tough? Yes, it will. With trail running, it's getting people to understand nature, and there's so many sort of close ties between climate change and the trails, and you can really see it in motion. Yeah, if I can get more people outside onto the trails, I can make a real difference.
The GB Marathon trials are at Kew Gardens tomorrow. There's not been a race like this there before. Evans too has run the distance just once competitively, but his theory is if you've raced over hundreds of miles, then a marathon's like a sprint. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
Wow, stunning pictures there. What little tour of the world we just had. And hard to believe that at the last Olympics in, Rio 2016, Tom wasn't even doing marathon running then, Anita. Incredible.
That is quite amazing to go from no marathon experience to that in 5 years. Phenomenal. What an inspiration. Mike, thank you very much. Now, middle-aged women experience the most severe, long-lasting symptoms after being treated in hospital for COVID-19. That's according to 2 studies. They found that 5 months on, 70% of patients were still affected by various issues such as anxiety, breathlessness and fatigue. With me now is Sue Lawson, who tested positive for COVID in May and has long-term symptoms. And I'm joined also by Dr. Rachel Evans, a respiratory consultant and associate professor at the University of Leicester, who's worked on the study. Very good to have both of you with us today. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Evans, first of all, tell us a little bit about the scope of the study, how many people you've looked at, and what conclusions, if any, you've come up with as to why middle-aged women in particular are suffering the most severe long-lasting symptoms?
Yeah, so our study FOSS-COVID is ongoing, and we're reporting at the results of the first 1,000 participants, to whom obviously we're very grateful for taking part. So out of this 1,000 patients, this is a group of people that were admitted to hospital with COVID-19 between March and November last year. And we found that recovery, those people that feel recovered versus not, were more likely. People were less likely to feel fully recovered if they were female, and in the sort of middle age bracket. So younger people and older people were actually more likely to feel that they'd recovered. And then we took this a step further by doing a range of quite sophisticated testing as an in-person test. And we also then looked at what was causing people not just to feel not recovered, but those that were more severely affected. And
what did you find?
And again, we found that females were more likely to be having severe impairments at that 5-month mark. Again, that middle age group were more likely to be affected. And interestingly, those people that were more overweight were more severely affected. And what was really interesting and helps us think both in terms of what mechanisms might be driving this and then what other treatments we might be able to offer was that we showed that there was a higher level of persistent inflammation in those severe groups.
Okay, so I'll come back to what you might do as a result of this study in a few moments, but let me talk now to Sue Lawson, who has long COVID. So Sue, tell us a little bit more about your story and what your symptoms are. How many months on now since you were first diagnosed?
11 months now. I first tested positive, had my first symptom on the 23rd of April last year, and then I tested positive on the 20th of May.
And were you, I know this study has been looking mainly at people who've been hospitalised because of COVID. Did you go into hospital at any point?
No, I was at my worst for about 7 to 10 days, and I had the majority of the symptoms, but I didn't have the continuous cough and the respiratory problems. My daughter rang 111 twice, and because I didn't have that symptom, they told me to stay at home, and it was managed at home.
Okay. Do you feel that you perhaps needed to be in hospital, that you might have recovered faster if you'd gone to hospital and had some treatment there?
No. Because I didn't have the breathing problems and the cough, it was the most worrying part was the high temperature, and that was monitored throughout the day and for the period when I was at my worst.
And I'm sure you never imagined that 11 months on you still would be having symptoms as a result of this. Tell us how this is affecting your daily life now.
It's been a nightmare for the last 11 months, but the last few weeks have been more positive. But I've had to I have to split my day into small projects is the major change, because of the fatigue and the brain fog and sort of headaches and nausea. I find I can't manage 80% of the stuff I used to manage. So if as I said, I have to break my day into small projects, and if I can manage one thing that day, then it's an achievement. And my life's had to adapt to this because you can't fight it. And if you try and fight it, you end up having a relapse after relapse after relapse. So you have to learn to live with it and adapt to it.
And you mentioned things just in the last few weeks getting a little bit better. I believe that you've just returned to work on a phased return. How's that going?
Yeah, it's going really well. I do a few hours on a Thursday, and that's going really well, and it will increase. And I've also I was also referred to a long COVID clinic in February, and I have some referrals coming up this week. I've been put on a fatigue management therapy program, and I'm seeing a neurologist as well this week for nerve pain that's still with me.
Rachel, the combination of people being referred to long COVID clinics and your study, what do you hope your study can add to the mix to help people with their recovery? Because as we've heard from, well, both Sue and other people with long COVID over the past year, the range of ongoing symptoms is hugely diverse, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And in our study, we showed that the average number of symptoms that people still had over 5 months and beyond, as Sue has highlighted, was 9. So that's part of the problem, is there's just not one symptom and one syndrome here.
So what do you think your study, I know it's early days, it's continuing, but in terms of developing therapies, treatments, advice, where do you think you're headed with that?
Yeah, so as I was alluding to, we've at least got that first step of what the underlying mechanisms might be, and further work within FOSS-COVID will be investigating that further. As far as clinical care, and as Sue was just discussing about that, those problems with fatigue, physically slowing down in thoughts, they were very common symptoms in our cohort, as well as breathlessness and pain. And those 4 groups that we've identified do help us that are involved in clinical care to start thinking more about the long COVID services that Sue's also discussed. We will be feeding some of our results back to there, but really they are highlighting what Sue has said, but just in a whole cohort where there are ongoing mental health, physical health, those problems with thinking, brain fog. The brain fog does seem to be in a different group, so that helps us think about how we might stratify clinical care to target those different problems. But overall, just because of the variety, we really need clinicians in different specialities to all work together so that people have a very fluid, combined programme.
Just something I want to ask you. It was a discussion I was listening to a few weeks ago, a sort of a speculative discussion about why some people were suffering long COVID. And the thought being discussed was that people who, when they initially had symptoms, were trying to keep going and not actually rest, were possibly more likely to go on to develop it. And I just wonder, with middle-aged women who, typically are incredibly busy, they may be looking after children, older parents, trying to hold down a job, etc., etc. Do you think there's something in that?
So the fatigue experts are probably best placed to comment on that. So we do know that fatigue itself affects that group more commonly in other conditions. I think we're interested in looking at how the immune system is responding in different groups, because we know that the effects on the acute illness, that men were actually more commonly affected, and older people were more, more likely to have the severe illness and very unfortunately more likely to die. And it seems that and we know there are different effects between gender in the immune system. Perhaps something different is happening in the after effects that's more affecting females.
Sue, it sounds like you're having to take your recovery in very small steps. But are you feeling more positive now than you were, say, a few months ago, especially since your referral to the long COVID clinic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely having a lot more good days than bad. But as I said before, you can't push this process. And if you try to push it and try to do what you used to do, it will knock you back and knock you back and knock you back. I didn't for one second think this would last nearly a year. But I think it just shows that it can affect absolutely everybody.
Well, we wish you the very best with your continued recovery, Sue, and hopefully lots and lots more of the good days, outnumbering the bad days. And Dr. Rachel Evans, thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the retail giant H&M is facing a backlash in China after the company expressed concern about the alleged use of forced Uyghur labour in the production of cotton in Xinjiang. In a statement last year, H&M said that it was deeply concerned by reports of forced labour and discrimination against Xinjiang's Muslim minorities. Yesterday, the Chinese Communist Youth League posted this message on social media saying spreading rumours to boycott Xinjiang cotton while wanting to make money in China. Wishful thinking. Shortly after, H&M disappeared from 2 of China's major shopping platforms. Chinese state television released photos mocking the H&M logo, calling it ridiculous. And Chinese celebrities have ended their ties with the retailer. Well, Western countries, including the UK, imposed sanctions on China this week over their treatment of the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. Our correspondent in Shanghai, Robin Brandt, is following developments.
H&M is big here in Shanghai. It's big across China. This is one of its multitude of locations in this country. But what's striking about what we've seen in the last 24 hours is how quickly and how all of a sudden, apparently, this campaign led by celebrity endorsers and led by some arms of the ruling Communist Party has come out of nowhere. And also what's so striking is how it's gathered pace in a matter of hours. So this is all about H&M's proclamation going back last year, which you just referred to, saying it wanted to purge its supply chain of cotton that was used and harvested in Xinjiang. That's the western province in China, where China is accused of abuses against the Muslim minority there. Genocide is actually how now President Biden's administration has classified the abuses going on. So what's most intriguing is that all of a sudden, just a few days after coordinated sanctions were imposed by the UK, the US and the European Union, we have arms of the Communist Party, the celebrity endorsers, happy to take H&M's money up until now, all of a sudden coming out of nowhere, bailing on the company and encouraging others to do the same. In the other end of the scale, you have retailers like Muji, the Japanese retailer. We just bought this shirt there this morning. On the label, this actually refers to Xinjiang cotton. So they're at the other end of the scale in terms of what's going on. But look, it's very serious. This kind of effort to use its economic clout, this kind of retail nationalism, is a very familiar tactic employed by China, employed by the party, employed by its government. And it's serious. Just ask the South Koreans. Their chain store Lotte suffered very seriously in years gone by over a diplomatic spat. Just ask the Philippines as well, the government there. Its fruit exports suffered seriously here. That was all about a diplomatic spat between its governments.
Robin Brandt reporting. President Biden's pick for Assistant U.S. Health Secretary Rachel Levine has become the first openly transgender person to receive Senate approval for a top federal job. 2 Republicans broke ranks to vote with Democrats in her favour. Dr. Levine will work in Washington on combating COVID-19. The Bank of England has unveiled the design of its newest £50 note. It features a portrait of the computer pioneer and codebreaker Alan Turing. No date has been set for the withdrawal of the current £50 note, but the Turing version will enter circulation in June. Nina Warhurst reports.
Alan Turing showed that by asking one question, you can change the world. His crypto-analysis at Bletchley Park had already helped bring the Second World War to an end when his insatiable curiosity fixated on one thing. By asking the question, can machines think, Alan Turing was combining mathematics with philosophy. What does it mean to be human? How far can computers imitate us, indeed go beyond us? And he said about his work, this is only a foretaste of what is to come, the shadow of what is going to be. And he wasn't wrong, was he? The smartphone you use, the tablet I'm using to Zoom Turing's nephew, and the green screen he's trying to set up.
You're quite blue.
Oh, there we go. I just have to be blue.
All exist because Alan Turing began the process of programming machines. Some better than others.
Right, so...
You're not doing much for the Turing name in terms of scientific prowess here, Dermot.
No, it's great, isn't it? Hold on. Got a conflagration here.
What's going on?
The red thing I put on the on the light, change the light colour, has tried to catch fire. So fire is out.
How much will having his face on a banknote help? How much will that raise conversation around him?
I think Alan Turing would have wanted us to think about things like underrepresentation of women in science subjects, underrepresentation of black ethnic minority kids in STEM subjects at school, and why they're not being given the opportunities that they should have, and why that's bad for all of us. These were things that I think he was quite keen on during his lifetime, and I'm very delighted that the Bank of England, in their choice of imagery on the banknote, decided not to major up on code-breaking and to focus on Alan Turing as a figure in computer science.
What do you think he'd make of his nephew's efforts of setting up a Zoom and setting the living room on fire?
I think he'd probably find at least some of that hilarious.
Alan Turing was 41 when he died after eating an apple with traces of cyanide. He'd been convicted simply for having a relationship with another man. But his legacy is everywhere, every day, in every country. As Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor, said, Turing is a giant on whose shoulders so many now stand.
And that's Nina Warhurst reporting. Some news coming into us. Santander is saying that it is going to close 111 branches in Britain and cut its office space. It says the latest in a series of decisions accelerated by the pandemic by lenders. Santander said the branches will close by August, adding that the long-term shift towards mobile and online banking has been accelerated by the pandemic. It's going to consolidate its office sites into 6 main locations and says its UK headquarters will move from London to Milton Keynes. Around 5,000 staff based at the sites that are closing will be offered new working arrangements, says the company, combining working from home with access to what they call local collaboration spaces. Santander's offices in Bootle, Newcastle, London, Portman House and Manchester Deansgate will close by the end of 2021. That statement just coming into us. Just time to quickly read out one more tweet, I think, on the subject of should vaccine passports be required for entry to pubs. Andrew H. says, in principle, vaccine passports are a great idea. When some exercise their freedom to reject vaccines, they should expect limitations on their actions that could adversely affect those who can't get a vaccine for medical reasons. I'll be talking about this subject with Kate Nichols, who is Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, about 10:10. So do stay with us for that. If you would like to send us your comments, we'd love to read them out. You can do that on Twitter at Annita_McVeigh and use the hashtag BBC Your Questions. Right now, it's time for a look at the weather, and here's Carol.
Hello again. The weather for the next couple of days is essentially one of sunshine and showers. But what you will find is that the showers will be wintry tomorrow as the temperatures are going to fall away, mostly on the hills, but in some of the heavier bursts we could see a little bit of sleet, for example, at lower levels. Today, though, what we have is a weak weather front which is moving southwards, taking a little bit of cloud with it, the odd spot of rain, but not a lot. And out towards the north and the west, we've got a fair few showers, some of them coming in across the English Channel as well, just affecting southern counties of England and the Channel Islands at times. But many of us will stay dry. In between the showers, there'll be bright spells of sunshine with top temperatures between 7 and 14 degrees. Now, through this evening and overnight, we'll start off with clear skies, still a few showers in the west and the south, but in the second half of the night, a new weather front comes in, introducing some heavy and persistent rain. It's a cold front, and behind that, we'll see a return to colder conditions. So some of the showers in the hills, for example, in Northern Ireland by morning could well be wintry. And this cold air coming in from the Atlantic pushes right the way across our shores during the course of Friday, getting into the far southeast of England last. So we start in the southeast with sunshine and showers. Here's our cold front bearing the rain, moving from the west to the east. Behind that, it's a return to sunshine and showers, but the showers wintry above about 200 metres or so, not just in the north. We'll see them in the hills of Wales and also the tops of the moors as well. But look at the temperatures, 7s and 8s and 9s. Top temperature will be 10, but it will feel colder because it's also going to be quite windy. Saturday sees a quieter day weather-wise, a lot of dry conditions, variable amounts of clouds, some sunshine. But out towards the west through the afternoon, the cloud will thicken ahead of a weather front, bringing rain initially into Northern Ireland. Still a cool feel with temperatures, especially in the north, below average for this time of year. As we move into Sunday, the weather front coming into Northern Ireland will push across us. Here's the end of it, bringing some rain at times across England and Wales. A few showers in the north, in Scotland, with again a fair bit of cloud and a fair bit of cloud across southern areas. But temperatures slowly starting to pick up, but still feeling cold in the north, and it will be windy everywhere.